Okay, hello, everyone. Welcome. I am starting fresh here, and well, to give you the lay of the land, I am going to attempt to play Minecraft while I talk about some political topics of the day. Things that interest me, things that I think I can add a unique perspective to. However, the catch is I'm very, very bad at Minecraft. And when I'm playing by myself, I usually play with mobs off. So if you hear me screaming and running, then yeah, that's probably what's going on. Anyway, so let's get into it. The thing that actually has me interested enough to try this is I was listening to my usual rounds of news and commentary today and just genuinely, truly frustrated by the complete misread, I guess. Not a complete misread, but the misread on DOGE and what DOGE actually means for the American people. Not what they're doing per se, but what they're doing means for the American people. Guess I need an index for that. Told you I was bad at Minecraft. So I basically feel like I've heard 4 basic opinions. And the first is the American people don't like DOGE because they're going to cut all of our programs and our entitlements and welfare, and they're going to throw people out on the street because they're just mean and they're trying to save money over human lives. They're not valuing people and what people contribute, which is honestly that's not what their mandate is. So DOGE has a mandate from the people to basically they're looking for the fraud, right? And they're not going to cut anything that's not fraud because the administration doesn't want to cut that. It's a political nightmare. No one wants to touch that third rail of American politics and cut entitlement and welfare programs. No one wants to do that, and so DOGE is not going to do that. One of the things that DOGE is definitely going to do, though, is get rid of waste that exists, some of it within those programs, fraud, and things where money should be diverted back to the people who actually need it. So that's the first thing that really irritates me. They're they're cutting the essential services. No one's going to have anything that they need. That's not what's going on. It's fine. The second take on DOGE that irks me is the people who think it's just world-endingly amazing. They're it's perfect. It's perfect. There's never been anything like it. We're going to completely write the budget of the United States of America, which is completely untrue. We are not going to settle the budget of the United States of America with the cuts to waste and fraud. It would be great if that was all that it took, but that's not all that it takes. So, it's a hopeful thought, but ultimately not one that's going to be very fruitful. That's not the key I meant to hit. So then the third take lands somewhere in between there, where the take, this is particularly, I've heard this a lot from Ben Shapiro this week, which is just the idea that what DOGE is doing is good and it's great, but we really need to drive home that it's not actually going to be super duper useful because we're not cutting those entitlement programs. We're not cutting those means-tested welfare programs, which are really the things that are breaking the budget of the United States. And while he's not technically wrong, no one holding that opinion is technically incorrect in their summation, I think they're really, the view that is missing on this is that the American people are not, they don't want people to touch those programs, right? But they're definitely never going to make touching those programs politically viable if they know that there's all this waste and fraud going on in the system, which you can say what you want about, oh, well, these things are necessary or not necessary. Look, the kind of things that DOGE is cutting, the kind of stuff that was going on at USAID, it might make sense to some politicos, but it does not make sense to the people who are just trying to live their everyday lives. Those are people who, they hear that we're spending tax dollars to, fund trans plays in Ireland and gender affirming care in Brazil, and it doesn't matter that those are, like, at best they might think that those are neutral things, but a lot of American people don't per se agree with those things. I've never seen an area like this before, but there's probably a lot of monsters there, so we'll come back later. What was I saying? But, like, the American people, like, that's at best neutral to them. And when you tell them that their country is $36 trillion in debt and growing, and they're going to have to withstand cuts and austerity measures because of that debt, and then you tell them that we're still funding stuff like that overseas in countries they don't care about, promoting ideas that at best they don't care about, and that at worst they actually think are, like, kind of harmful to be spread, then that's a seriously big problem. You're never going to win that argument with the American people. So DOGE cuts to get rid of this fraud and waste that's going on in the country is actually step one to finding fiscal responsibility, because you're going to need the goodwill of the American people eventually to is he still following me? Okay, I will leave the skeleton forest. I'm definitely going to die trying to, but I'll do it. But you need the goodwill of the American people to make those cuts, even in the eventuality in the next 5 to 8 years, which is what seems to be the going understanding of when like social security will become completely fiscally insolvent. It's just like 5 to 8 years away, maybe 10 if we're lucky. If we really right the ship and things shape up for a little while, assuming that, there's no big war with China or anything that gets in the way of that, then it looks like we are going to be fiscally insolvent in that amount of time, which means austerity measures. But even that, like, they tried to pass austerity measures in France, and what they ended up with is they ended up getting a lot of protests and riots and people who were really, really upset over those austerity measures, and they had to back off them, but they have no money, and so they're continuing to borrow. It's going to cause runaway inflation. It's going to continue to be a problem, and the French people, the French government really needs the will of the people to back them on this, and it's just simply not there. And so what I'm saying is I think the American people can be persuaded to make reasonable adjustments to these programs. I'm not talking about completely undoing Social Security. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the nanny state, but I understand that you can't just rip something like that out from underneath people. But you've got to start talking about raising the retirement age, because people, when Social Security was set up, I believe, these numbers, I'm not fact checking them obviously because my hands are a little occupied at the moment, but I believe, if I recall correctly, that people were the retirement age was 67. It's 67, and the people were living until 65. Like, they were dying 2 years before retirement was supposed to start, which is why this whole system worked, because you could have people pay into it, and then they wouldn't necessarily be around to collect it. And if they were around to collect it, which was fine, but they wouldn't be around, collecting it for 20 years or more, which is now what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who are collecting Social Security for 20 years or more, and we just simply do not have the capacity to pay out benefits to all these people. So that's the big gist of the problem there, and it's the thing that's actually been really irritating me about people's takes on DOGE. Is it's like it's the best thing that's ever happened, or it's evil, or even if you're taking the most reasonable of the three takes that I've heard, which is that, like, it's okay, but it's not good enough. Like, it's good enough because it's the best that we're going to get right now. We are not going to get anything better than DOGE at the current moment, because we don't have the political will in the country to do that. Okay, bed, before the monsters show up. Woo. But yeah, it's one of the things that really bugs me about the way people talk about politics, is there's always something to complain about, right? So, like, you can't just be happy with, like, how things are going. You have to. Did someone kill me? Okay. But you have to be very aggressive about it. And it just really, you have to be complaining about something. That's what I mean to say. It's really hard to talk and do this at the same time, guys. But the good news is that there is a lot of good stuff happening right now that is moving us in the direction of fiscal responsibility. I really love hearing the president, peacocks, talk about programs that will set the United States up for good fiscal position, be it these gold cards, or be it, making a deal for rare earths minerals in Ukraine. You can say all you want that, like, oh, well, we should be helping Ukraine, but the fact of the matter is we don't have the money. We do not have the money. And I would like to see Russia not take over the Donbass and Crimea in Ukraine. I think that would be good. I don't think it's good for Russia to be a country invading another sovereign country. I think it makes the world less stable. I think it would be very helpful if that were not the case, if that was not what was happening. But we don't get to pick what world we live in, and the fact of the matter is that it is not a friendly world, and we don't have the money to stop them. We cannot make every issue our issue. Is that a monkey? So, but actually, on the topic of Russia and Ukraine, which I find just so interesting, because I'm a Russophile in the sense that, like, I think Russia is incredibly interesting. I don't think that they're right, but it's such a strange and perplexing country. I just find it fascinating to study, and I love the way that the language sounds, all these different things. And my computer's freezing up again. And so I actually know a fair bit about Russian history, and it's like, if you actually know about Russian history, their invasion of Ukraine doesn't surprise you, because you know a thing or two about Vladimir Putin, and so it's like, yeah, okay, it kind of makes sense that that's what he would do. But more than that, it's what Russia as a country would do, not because Russia is, like, inherently that much more evil than any other nation on the face of the earth. But Russia is a huge country that's always had trouble keeping up with its European neighbors, and has always wanted to keep up with its European neighbors. So they have this weird, like, inferiority-superiority complex where they really, really want to be taken as, like, one of the premier world powers. They want to be they want to be one of the big guys on the block. They want to be one of the sophisticated European nations. They want to be thought of as all these different things. And it aggravates them, frustrates them, but they're always behind. Oh, I have a shovel. Anyway, Russia. So they always feel like they're sinking behind. So they have that insecurity, and then on top of that, they are a huge country with so many borders. And they're not friendly borders. So, like, in the United States, we have the border with Mexico, and then we have the border with Canada. And while Mexico has recently been a somewhat more adversarial, somewhat more failed state, it's generally been a pretty peaceful neighbor that we've gotten along with quite well. And obviously, we get along very well with Canada. It's one of the most peaceful borders in the world, and certainly the largest peaceful border in the world of its kind, which is great for us. It works out great for us. But Russia doesn't have that. Russia has borders with China, or areas that it contends over for a sphere of influence with China. Russia has borders with, like I said, it has borders with European nations, with Middle Eastern nations. It has all these different areas that can be vulnerabilities for it. And so it's actually, what on earth is that? A bamboo creeper? Oh, it's got... I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. Help me, I made a mistake. Is it following me? Can't run. Anyway, so it has all these geopolitical vulnerabilities too, and so the way that Russia feels secure in its borders is actually just to kind of flex its muscles and show its strength to these other countries, so that they don't start to make mild incursions on its borders, especially now in this season of political weakness. So Russia has not really recovered from the fall of the Soviet Union. Like, the fall of the Soviet Union to most of us sounds like forever ago, and like it's in the history books, like it's another lifetime. it's not like something that could be ongoing or affect current policy, but it really does in Russia, because they have not been the same since the fall of the Soviet Union. So they really struggle with this idea, this image of themselves as like this country that was humiliated by that and exposed as a place that wasn't really functional. And now they're left, and they've got all these internal problems. They have massive drinking problems, alcohol problems in the country. As on top of that, they have village. Where village? I don't see village. Over there? Maybe? It doesn't show me any villagers. Ah, straight ahead. We will go there. No. Although I guess I should probably just get rid of that now. I should probably eat more apple. But they have all these alcoholism problems that, I mean, alcoholism, like, we can hardly even imagine. And then on top of that, they have massive economic issues. They have whole towns that were thriving Soviet towns out in the Siberian wilderness that are just being subsumed back into the landscape. There's nothing there anymore. There's cold winters and short summers, lots of mosquitoes, a blanketing of mosquitoes, and there's almost nothing good going on for them. It's really, really, truly tragic. And so when you start to understand that, you start to understand why people might maybe support is strong. I don't know how much they support the war in Ukraine or the invasion, but I know that there are people who want a more liberal society who are inside of Russia, but they are also facing all of these geopolitical issues that they have to find a way to work around. And so it's a complex thing. I think, often we make these things very simple. It's evil side versus good side, which is, there's usually a side that's more right and a side that's more wrong, but it's not always as simple as evil and good. And it's tragic that these things keep happening to Russia. They keep getting so close. You think, the Soviet Union fell. Now they can finally be like a well-formed liberal society. There's a chance for them to remake themselves as this new thing, and it falls apart. Just the same way the Tsar was overthrown, and you would think, maybe something good and new will emerge here. And instead you get the Soviet Union, and you get gulags and death camps, and which is the outgrowth of communism. I'm not going to listen to anyone who says that it's not the outgrowth of communism. If you really want to read into that, I would recommend Stephen Kotkin's biography of Stalin, which will be 3 volumes if he ever finishes it. Me and his publisher are the only people waiting breathlessly for this book. But I am waiting breathlessly, I assure you. But he goes very much into depth on the way that the people running the regime there were definitely communists. They were not just, evil guys using communism to their own ends because they wanted to wreak all this destruction anyway. And of course the biggest example of this is when Stalin collectivized the farms. That was unpopular. His ministers were pushing him not to collectivize farming because it was going to wreck the economy. It was going to cause all of these issues. And they were like, no, don't do it. It's going to be a big problem for us to control, and it did cause huge famines across the Soviet Union. The famine in some sort of a bowl. Oh, it's better. The famine in the Ukraine, which was such a big issue and has spread such animosity between the two peoples, was not actually a genocide purposely perpetrated on the people of Ukraine. There was famine everywhere, and they weren't a priority for Stalin, and he didn't want to admit there was famine. And also, he was an autocratic dictator, which means that everyone was lying to him. His advisors were lying to him. They were telling him there was more grain than there was, that the famine was not as bad as it was, because who wants to deliver bad news to the guy who's signing all of these death warrants for people? So that is a brief dive into what the Soviet system really looks like. I can't mind that. This is so glitchy. Ooh. Okay. Well, I need to find diamonds, but I think I can probably sleep here for the night. But it's crazy how complicated things can be when you pay attention to them. I do need to make a door. I hope a redwood door looks nice. The other thing is I usually play this, and I'm mostly focused on what things look good. Deciding how I should operate. I play without mobs, and I just choose the things that I think look the best. It's a very different game. But yeah. Anyway, I just thought that it might be kind of fun to talk politics, because I love talking politics. No one will talk enough politics with me. And I also love my good conservative commentary. But it does feel like one of those crazy things where there's a hole in the conservative commentariat for like sane women. There are a few, and I don't mean to be harsh to anyone who's in that space. Well, I don't mean to be harsh to everyone who's in that space, but it is a little bit frustrating as a woman to be interested in politics, because it feels like so many of the women who get into it, they kind of fall into two camps. The first is they tend to be a little crazy, a little weird. Just like kind of, I mean, you get that with men too. There's just in the political commentariat space, there's just room to be a little crazy and still have a following. People still really like listening to you, so it kind of works for some people. You think of your your Candace Owenses and Milo Yiannopoulos on the male side. But like for women specifically, it seems like you kind of either get people who are a little kooky, or turn out to be a little kooky. They don't always start out that way. But you have that on one side of the spectrum. On the other side of the spectrum, you have people who are, I really respect, like May and Kelly, who are really bright people, but they're definitively career women, and so they don't cover the issues from the perspective of a lot of women, which is the perspective of someone who's the most important thing to them is their kids and not their job. I just, it's one of those things where like I've worked a job and I do not care for corporate life very much. And it really colors the way that my worldview operates, because it really feels like, there's a lot of issues where it's like, especially on feminist topics, I object to the premise. I think the premise is wrong, but there's no space for me to really object to that. No one is speaking with that voice out in the public square, because the women who share my perspective are busy. We're at home. We have kids and babies and dogs and houses, and there's always a bathroom that needs cleaned and dinner needs made, and you gotta get to this store or that store to buy the thing that we forgot to get. And so it's like, it's just one of those things where like, it's not anyone's fault that they're not covering things with my perspective, but I feel like there is a valuable perspective in that. Like I was reading someone who was talking, not a political commentator, just like a person who was talking about, the normalization of daycare and how, like, most kids are brought up in daycare, and how when, like, she brings that up, a lot of people will, cite their objections to that, and like, is this gonna work for me? There we go. Thank you. But like the argument always stems from like, oh, so you just think women should stay in the house all day? A woman can have a career too. And like, yeah, guys, I think we've learned that women can have careers too. The difference is that I don't care. I don't want a career. I'm not interested in a career. I don't feel like, oh, I wish I had a career. No, I think that the argument that is missing in the public square is like the one that says a career does not interest me, and I'm happy to work a job if I need to. I'm happy to develop skills that are marketable if I need to, but it is a privilege to get to stay home with my kids, and it's a privilege to be able to watch them grow, and to not have to spend my days working a 9-to-5 for a corporation that does not care about me, will not care about me, and would let me go at the drop of a hat. Like I have done the 9-to-5, and it's I do not understand the way that it is glamorized to be like, to have a career. I just feel like, a career? Really? Okay, you say so. You really feel like that's the thing you want to do with your time. I'm not gonna stop you, or I can't stop you, but I guess. Like, I don't know, I thought we all kind of griped about work. Like fluorescent lights in offices and meetings and emails and I don't know. It just seems like it's hard to give that perspective when you're a career person who's chosen to prioritize your career, which is fine. But I think it's important to also hear from women who, even if they're busy, they have something to share, and they can provide valuable perspective and insight into things. Like, one of the reasons we can't touch entitlements right now, to bring this full circle, is that we don't have the cultural fabric to encourage people to take care of each other, which is what we used to rely on before we had Social Security, before we had Medicare and Medicaid, which I just learned that apparently Medicaid is basically good for no one and nothing, because no doctors take it. But I really need to get some food. And I have a bucket, so let's hop to it. But anyway, before we had those programs, what we had were churches and family members, and your family, you moved in with them, you expected to take care of your aging parents, you expected to take care of your neighbors when they were sick, you expected to take care of people in your church community. I know that well, not everyone's part of a religious community, and maybe we need to find a secular workaround for that, a secular form of that kind of community that can be helpful to people. Maybe one of the things that we actually need to do is to encourage people to be in church communities again, to seek that out, because it's really important that you have that when times get tough. I mean, when I've had times of trouble in my life, when I know people in my church who have had times of trouble in their lives, it's not like it's not a question of if we're going to help them, if they're going to have the support that they need. It's a question of, how are we going to help them? How can we give them the support that they need? Which is, it's a very different way to live than to, it's a very different way to live than to be reliant on the government, or to act like people have a right to kind of live in a self-destructive way, which is what a lot of the homelessness is about. Because, my dad always said, if we ever got into trouble and we were homeless, the first place we'd go is down to the Salvation Army. I'm not trying to plant it, I'm trying to eat it. Calm down. And we would be, doing whatever they said, whatever we needed to do to get back on our feet. And I think a lot of people don't want to take the attitude. They don't want to follow someone else's rules, even if they're in really dire straits. And I don't mean to be you can always pull yourself up by your bootstraps, because you know what? Sometimes life's real hard on people, and they just don't have that option. But a lot of times, there are places you can go and things you can do and resources you can take advantage of, but you do have to make the effort. Life is this crazy thing that's it's half deterministic, where like things just happen to you and you have no control over them, but it's also half complete free will, and you have to take action and make the necessary choices to take control in your life, or you will end up suffering because of your lack of agency. It's just how it is. Okay, come on, load. You can do this. Yes. So, this has gotten quite long and quite rambly, and I've now built myself a little house, which seems like maybe a good enough place to stop. So, until next time, sayonara.